Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the realistic possible outcomes for the general election which will be taking place across the UK in 2 weeks' time, with a particular eye on how those results will inform the Brexit journey in 2020. But first, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, before we go through the realistic results, two things. First of all, if you're in a position to go out and vote in 2 weeks' time, make sure you do it. Yes, I mean you. Don't think to yourself on a cold December morning, oh, it's a bit cold. My vote doesn't count anyway. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Anyway, the other thing we should go through is a recap of the position of the various parties who are likely to gain a share of the seats in Westminster, because with the only party that could possibly get a majority, realistically speaking, being the Conservatives, what we have to look at is not just what is each party's position were it to form a government, but each party's position were it to support another party in a hung parliament. So the Conservatives, of course, under Boris Johnson, are all gung-ho, hard Brexit. As I was talking about in a video earlier today, they really need a no-deal Brexit. They can't get it immediately, so they're going to have to settle for the end of 2020, but it's coming. They want to leave the EU on January the 31st, 2020, then pretend to negotiate a full trade deal within 11 months. But if by some bizarre chance it becomes impossible to do what nobody has ever done before, then we leave the transition period safety net without any arrangements on 31st of December 2020. In other words, the no-deal Brexit happens. It's just going to be delayed a little. Labour have committed to a referendum with Remain as an option within 6 months. So that means by May 2020 at the latest. They also want to piss about negotiating yet another withdrawal agreement to stick on that referendum. This is likely to be basically May's deal rather than Johnson's, but with changes to the political declaration. However, if Labour can't form a majority government, or at least can't form government at all, it's a bit debatable about what happens in a minority government situation. But if they are still in opposition after the general election, then their position is to demand another referendum with Remain as an option, and that they will campaign for Remain under those circumstances. The SNP have also indicated support for another referendum with Remain as an option, but of course there's a different referendum that they have their eye on, but they will support a Brexit referendum as well. The Liberal Democrats have a policy of revoking Article 50 without even bothering with another referendum if they form a government. However, if they can't, and they can't. And also, actually, even now, senior members of the Liberal Democrats are publicly admitting that they've got about as much chance of forming a majority government as Boris Johnson has as becoming a missionary. Then in that situation, they will support another referendum with Remain as an option. Plaid Cymru and the Green Party are very much in the market for another referendum with Remain as an option, as are all the Northern Irish parties as far as I can tell, with the exception of the DUP. However, the DUP are no fans of Boris Johnson's deal, and so they will have some political shifting to do if that remains the only form of Brexit possible. So in terms of outcomes, a Conservative majority has a decent probability. The result of this is that Boris Johnson would get his withdrawal bill passed through Parliament according to the initial and speedy timetable that he initially wanted, and there will be no amendments to it. We will then leave the EU in January 2020, just a few weeks after the election. Nothing will prevent that. It was only narrowly averted when Johnson had a minority government. What happens then will be more nonsense, as Johnson's team make the same pretense of negotiations as May's team did during the Article 50 period. The difference being that the EU won't have to take any of our crap, and may well, I don't know, they may well choose to only engage when we're being sensible and grown up, which may not be that frequently. We'll find ourselves halfway through next year with no progress at all, of course all blamed on the EU. Now that's not necessarily a slight on our negotiating team necessarily. I don't think you'd get any substantial progress, not what a populace would consider substantial progress in a mere 5 months in any trade deal negotiations, even if competently carried out. But this is the point at which we, according to Johnson's own withdrawal agreement, we would need an extension to the transition period if we're going to be ready. We can't just ask for one a few weeks before. we're not even going to be close to ready, and it's possible that Conservative MPs will get a bit fidgety as the reality of no deal looms again. But if past experience tells us anything, it is that they are unlikely to rebel when there's still months to go before disaster. Johnson will say, oh no, we're making brilliant progress, we're easily going to get it done, and that'll be that. Now, at the end of 2020, unless there is a serious rebellion, we will end the transition period without arrangements for trade and, in all probability, security either. Maybe we'll have a few bilateral trade agreements, agreements for something arranged, certainly not trade agreements. I'm not sure. 2021 will then see the reality of Brexit really bite and pockets of rebellion beginning in the Conservative ranks. Brexit will, of course, have already happened, so no impact on that stage. It'll just mean another general election. We'll just have general elections every 2 years, eh? How about that? So now let's say Boris Johnson fails to get a majority, but only a few MPs short, as happened with Theresa May in 2017. Now, in this scenario, I would expect Johnson's withdrawal bill to still go through on the back of opposition rebel MPs, likely from Labour, and we will still leave the EU in January. The same scenario sort of happens, only he won't get all of his own way. The path will be less certain once we've left. So those opposition MPs will not have been supporting Johnson, only Brexit. So he's unlikely to get his way when it comes to taking us out without a deal. In this case, I'd expect us to move from regular extensions of Article 50 to regular extensions of the transition period as we settle down for what is actually going to be years of negotiation, all the trade deals. They always take years in reality. And remember, we don't just need trade deals with the EU, that's prime importance. We need them with other countries as well. Now, in this time, of course, we'll be following all the EU rules, having no say in them at all, but paying more than we ever did as members as well. Just like Norway. Well, Farage always did say the Norway model was a good one, didn't he? So what if Johnson falls well short of a majority, but is still the leader of the largest party in Parliament? Let's say based around numbers very similar to that of the Parliament that just dissolved for this general election. Now, in that case, he would remain Prime Minister, as Labour would not be able to get back in for Corbyn to take over, just like they didn't before it dissolved. We'd have the same situation, essentially, but the parliamentary arithmetic would be against Johnson's bill and party leaders would be committed to trying to get a public vote through in this situation. Now, rebels in opposition parties could still make that difficult with a firm push from Corbyn. But ultimately, the path in this scenario would be a bit clouded because it would depend. It's not just based on numbers. It depends on individuals that win or lose their seats. So let's say there's a number of Labour MPs who, because they're in a Leave constituency, they feel that the way to get re-elected was to be very pro-Brexit. And that meant rebelling against Labour's position and voting for Boris Johnson's deal and Theresa May's deal before Boris Johnson. Now, if those MPs lose their seats, then Jeremy Corbyn or whoever is leader at that point, could still be Jeremy Corbyn, is very likely to have better control over those MPs. Similarly, if the very hard-line Brexiteers lose their seats, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Dominic Raab, Zach Goldsmith has almost certainly lost his seat. In that scenario, some moderate Tory MPs who were at the time, very recently, even though they knew Johnson's deal was a bad one, were reluctant to rebel, might start to feel that rebelling is maybe the best thing to do, that his days are numbered. If he loses some of his key supporters, after all, they may smell blood. So it may be that Johnson has a tougher time of getting his withdrawal bill through there. On the other hand, if you end up with a decent number of Labour rebels and those hardline Brexiteers in the Conservative Party aren't losing their seats, then it could go the other way. So where he falls well short of a majority, it could still depend. It could still be very tight and we could still end up with a bit of deadlock. Now, let's say Labour become the largest party in Parliament. But I'm afraid to say, even as a Labour supporter, I don't believe that would be a majority. I don't think that's on the cards. I don't think we have enough target seats, quite frankly. But, we're short of a majority, but nonetheless the largest party. Now, what would happen in that scenario? It depends on relative numbers. If the SNP could prop up Corbyn as Prime Minister, then you will end up with another referendum, certainly. Depends, doesn't it? The SNP are making a lot of noises about certain red lines for support for Labour, but at the same time, what they definitely will support is the referendum. They can't not support that with their position. They can not support other bits of Labour legislation, but they can't not support the referendum. So that would be certain. In theory, you could say that they won't support his efforts to negotiate another withdrawal agreement. However, if Jeremy Corbyn is Prime Minister, he forms the government, and if he wants to go off and negotiate with the EU, Parliament won't be able to stop him doing that. They can say to Corbyn, no matter what you come back with, we're going to vote against it, and therefore make the whole exercise futile, but they can't stop him actually doing that. But what it will mean, as I say, is we will definitely get the referendum by May. Corbyn promised by May, and certainly those who need to prop him up as Prime Minister would hold him to that. So those are the scenarios there. So obviously what we're looking for is for Boris Johnson to fall well short of a majority, ideally for Labour to form a minority government, because then there'll be no obstacles at all to the Brexit referendum, because he'll be trapped and the party will be behind that anyway, and the only way he'll get any support as Prime Minister. Because remember, it's not enough for Corbyn to be the leader of the largest party. That doesn't make you Prime Minister. What makes you Prime Minister is getting more than half the MPs to support you as Prime Minister. Until then, Boris Johnson stays Prime Minister. He stays Prime Minister until someone replaces him. So Corbyn, with a minority government potential, still needs other MPs to say, yeah, we'll give you our confidence. And that'll come with that price. So hopefully that clears a few things up. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then also please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.